Hi, I'm Isabel, founder and firebrand of the Uprising Spark.
Hi, I'm Kristen, author of The Age of the Child.
Hi, I'm Lenora. I'm creator of The Bitchy Bookkeeper, and we are the 3 founding non-mothers of Childfree Girls. In this episode, we have Jackie Shannon Hollis, who is our guest today. She is author of the memoir, This Particular Happiness, A Childless Love Story. So thank you for joining us today, Jackie. Your perspective is very interesting and fascinating to us because you are a woman who actually wanted to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And you married someone who did not want to be a father.
Yes.
I want to get your perspective on, first of all, wanting to be a mother and just how you got to the place where you are now.
Well, let me think about how I want to say this. I'm just going to kind of start off with where the book starts, and just say that I married my husband, Bill. I grew up thinking that I would be someone who would have a child. It was a generation. I was born in the late 50s, grew up in the 60s and 70s where all the women that I knew were having children. And that it was just set up as an expectation. It was never really a question. And I did not see any, other than my great aunt Lena, any other women who didn't want to have children. So it just was this automatic thing. And I went through a number of relationships, what I call research now. And in the process of that, I got married and divorced. And in the process of that, I began to question, why do I want to have a child? What is this? Is this just an automatic thing that I'm doing? And consider that, maybe my life would be just fine. And right around that time was when my second husband, my forever husband, I always think when people say my current husband, walked into my life. And he was 10 years older than me, and he did not want to have children for a number of reasons. And I married him fully agreeing to not wanting to have, that we would not have children. And I thought I would be okay with that. And soon after our marriage, my mother expressed her disappointment and sadness about me not having children. And that led me into just a world of confusion about, and also a time when I was in my 30s, my body began to sort of have this desire, what seemed like it was of my body, to have a child. And it was quite intense. And so that was the journey for most of my 30s. I wanted to have a child. And I also did not want to be resentful of my husband, who remained steadfast in his decision. And so I made it through that period of time of wanting. And by the time I was in my 40s, I had really settled more with it. And now I'm 61, and I am quite content with my life. And I also have times where I'm very aware of the otherness of not having children, as I'm sure even women who have a very clear view about not wanting to have children experience this feeling of being in a world of pronatalism, of the celebration of pregnancy and childbirth.
You said there was a period where you felt physically or biologically, like you felt it in your person that you wanted to have a baby. And that makes me think that it makes me think of what they call a biological clock. And I'm just wondering what that felt like.
It felt like a yearning inside me, just longing. And, when I look back on that now, because there really is there's no proof that there is anything biological necessarily that causes this desire. But in me, it felt like, what longing feels like. Something's missing. And it may be some people feel it when they're longing for love in their life. I felt it in my body, and I also had a lot of dreams. And it was also, I would be quite obsessed is a little too extreme, but fascinated by it whenever I was around a woman who was pregnant, really wondering what was that like. And I had quite a romance with pregnancy and childbirth. Most of the women who've gone through that are like, you got to be kidding me about the romance about it. But my family had a story about having really easy pregnancies. So I had dreams of being pregnant. I had this experience when I would hold an infant of deep comfort in those moments, and they were really bodily sensations of longing or peace with the baby. It wasn't there all the time. It wasn't a constant thing, but it was definitely something that happened for me. For you, you all haven't had that at all, or?
No, actually, this is interesting. If you wanted to ask us questions about that, because that would be an interesting dialogue. Never had that.
No, I think I have. But I fully understood afterwards that it was just, societal pressure, like what people expected me to do, not that I wanted for myself. I've heard of many people whose marriages have fallen apart because they cannot agree whether, having children, not having children, how many children we're going to have. So I'm wondering, how did you and your husband cope during all this time that you were, just having all these feelings? And I understand, it's really, sometimes it's like this yearning, it's very strong. So I'm just wondering how that, how your marriage survived, basically.
Yeah. Well, we both came into the relationship having had a lot of unsuccessful tries at long-term relationship. And so we both had a very high intention to be together, to stay together. And for me, a lot of it was about accountability for my own feelings and not putting my change of plans onto Bill. Even though I did at times ask, hope, wish, plead, I don't know that I really went so far as to pleading, but really questioning a lot. Why? Why don't you want to have a child? Thinking that somehow some light bulb would go off in him that would change that. And he remained quite clear through it all. So that just, but he also didn't make me wrong for my feelings. He didn't, get on me about, you made this agreement and you have to stick with it. He just gave me space to have my feelings, which he's done in many other areas. I went through a period of time of being quite depressed, not just about this, but other things that had come up in my life. And he just said, you've got to just don't pretend that it's not there, just be with it. And so I think for both of us, it's giving each other space to have the feelings that we have and not taking responsibility for them ourselves to fix them or to have to change ourselves, but to know, okay, you're going through something and I'm here with you to support you as you go through it. But I'm not going to take necessarily responsibility for it. It's hard. I mean, I think it's a tricky thing in a relationship, but it's something we've worked on a lot in many areas about how to hold each other capable to manage our own emotions.
That is something I noticed in this memoir is the amount of communication over time through the relationship between you and Bill. And I mean, how you write, it's something that I could relate to in relationships or even just battling my own thoughts, whether you're childless, child-free, whatever you're going through. There's a lot of parallels. And there's something that you mentioned that really stuck out to me was you mentioned being distracted by baby wanting. And, this goes with anything in our lives, but you mentioned in your 30s, like you spent a lot of that time wanting and yearning. And I'm just curious, with the pressure there is in society to procreate, and then we focus on, okay, we need to find the right partner. We need to get on, we're on this timeline. All of that energy, as you mentioned, spent on trying to make something happen that, if we all just took a step back and go, like you did, is this what I want? Why do I want this? I wonder what will free up for other things that I know maybe are not as valued by society standards, but actually are very beneficial to the world and to yourself and to your relationships. Like I just want to talk about that somehow, is that energy, putting on that energy around being distracted by baby wanting when actually maybe it's not necessary.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of bring this back around to a question for the three of you, but I for me, some of, when I go look back on those years, I think that, and this goes back to this idea of longing inside ourselves, is that I think longing is sort of this natural thing. And we're trying to find something, but in a way it's a bit of a distraction from what is, from being present. And just, seeing what we have right in front of us. And, so there's that part of it. And I think the idea of, this sort of the striving for the next thing and all those expectations, is a way of not noticing what is and what do I really want. So it's always this question for me of coming back to what is it I want and need right now? And what do the people, who are primary in my life, what do they want and need? So all of that. But I'm curious then, if for the three of you, if you take away the strong urge or desire or the sense of an imperative to have a child, what then does come forward for you, do you think? I mean, it's a question for you.
Well, personally, it's led to me, like I turned 37 in a few days, and all of this has led to me wanting to speak about not wanting to have children, which is bizarre because I had a career before and I loved it and I thought that was the end all be all for myself. And then going through a decade of just doing different things and learning about myself has led me to now going, oh, this is a conversation I love having that really is nobody's business, but I'll talk about it day and night, as everybody knows. And that has given me a sense, or is giving me a sense of being present, of like, what can I do now to help this conversation grow, like continue and encourage people to speak out. And it's given me, I guess if that's what it's given me is opportunities.
That's great.
Yeah. In weird ways. Like, I think this is a weird way to spend my days, but I love it. As parents say, I wouldn't change this for the world. So that's where it's led me personally.
Well, in my case, after I realized that I didn't want to have children, first to realize I had a choice, and then to be like, great, I don't want to have any children. I didn't know I have the choice, and now I can focus on the things that really make me happy. So that's what I've been like. That yearning that I used to have for a child when I thought I wanted one now has turned into wanderlust, just complete and utter wanderlust, which is one of my passions. And also, just what we're doing here with Kristen and Lenora, plus my own personal projects, like everything that I'm passionate about, that's what keeps me up at night now. That's what makes me wake up really early in the morning. That's what keeps me, plugged into the computer or the phone, because it makes me happy. Like, I feel fulfilled.
I've never thought about a desire to have kids. It just was never there. So there was nothing to take its place in that way. But I've just always been, for as long as I can remember, just been interested in writing, really. And so that's where all my passion and drive goes. That's where my energy goes, I guess. I've always been interested in writing and true love, and I found that in my forever husband.
Well, I think that that's one of the things for me that it kind of touches with what each of you are saying, is this sense of, I think that women for a long period of time had a pretty narrow band for what they could do with their passion or desire or longing, which was have a children and be a homemaker, and that there were creative endeavors that were within that, but it was fairly more narrow. And so, especially I think maybe even more your generation than mine, just the possibility of saying there's these other things I can do with the drives that I have, whether it's like travel or, all the creating or speaking out on something. I mean, all of those things I think are all of the ways that we now have to express the longing, the passions in us. So for me, I think as I look back on the time of wanting, it really was so much about that. And Kristen, when I came to writing, it's like, this is the place. this is a, such a deep creative experience.
And then when your phase of feeling that strong, intense urge to have a child, so you didn't have that at first, and then you had it, and then at what point was there an aha moment where it went away? Was it a tapering off that involved you having to make it go away because you were battling between the idea of a child and staying with your husband? Or
I think that it was like almost any emotion or thing that we struggle with. It wasn't. It was something that came and went, and there were times where I was sort of through the years of longing where I was also wildly child free. I mean, it wasn't just one thing. I loved it. I was fully aware of what came into my life in the absence of children, the opportunities I had, the travel I had, the financial stability I had, the good nights of sleep, I can go on and on. There were so many things. And the opportunity to explore my relationship. So all of that was there. And so it wasn't like I spent 10 years intensely wanting. I would say that over the period of time, the wanting declined. And about the time I turned 40, and through some events that were even in the book, it really did go out the door, just really understanding, I'm done with that. And then there was a space left, not so much a space of, I have to give that up, and now how do I fill it? But I think a space that had always been there, and hollow that I had been using this distraction of child wanting to fill. And that when that was gone was when really a more truly deeper exploration of my own creativity and desires came forward.
Wow. It's really inspiring to hear you talk like that, because there are many women out there who are childless. So they want to have children. For some reason, they can't. And some of them transition and become child-free by circumstance in a way. But there is that period of grieving that they cannot have children. And I think it's very important for them to, I understand that it can hurt. But I think it's important that they see the silver lining of that, which is expansion. It's, you can build a whole very fulfilling life without children. Like, you don't have to have them.
Yeah, some of it also is this feeling that, for me, it was so much of also the outside, trying to tease out what are the outside pressures and expectations. How much of this is me just wanting to fit in with, the club of mothers and the expectations. And then I realized, women get asked questions all through our lives about the next thing. When are you going to, do you have a boyfriend yet? Or partner yet? Are you going to get married? When are you going to have a child? When you have a child, when are you going to have another child? When's the next one coming along? And then you're having a third, that it's just like, there's all of these kinds of pressures that happen. And then it's all about the next steps for those children and then grandchildren. And I think it's kind of like, it's looking at how much am I responding to all of that out there. And I think especially for women who are dealing with this in-between place or the grief over infertility, is really looking at what is the source of my longing? How else do I fill that? And not as a replacement or second best, but what is the passion that I have and how can I do that? I'm always interested in, I have now friends who never wanted children. And I've always been just very curious about that, like just the complete absence of desire or longing for that. I'm really glad that this conversation that you're having also speaks to that, because I think a lot of women have felt like they've had to hide that.
Everything you just said made me think of what fantastic advertising is out there that makes us feel as women like we must, in general, like we must want a kid. Mm-hmm. Otherwise we're not, we're missing something, just like advertising has so successfully made a lot of people feel like they need the next iPhone and the next iPhone. And you really do, or whatever the product is, or whatever the brand, especially brand clothing. If I have this jacket that I got at consignment, and a friend of mine looked at the label on the tag, and then she said she didn't have her glasses, and she couldn't see the label. And I checked the label, and I was like, oh no, it comes from this store I absolutely hate. And for a couple of days, I actually hated that jacket, even though I loved it very, very much before. That's how effective advertising is, and brand, importance. And I think it's the exact same thing when it comes to marriage, babies, and all that stuff. I mean, you just think, well, I can't not want it, because that's just not acceptable, and everybody wants it and everybody's doing it. And, but it's so subtle and so pervasive and so powerful that it's not recognized that that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a niece who I had a number of my family members read my book before it was published, and a niece who has 3 daughters read it, and she said, she talked to me about feeling really uncomfortable as she read it, and sort of guilty. And I thought, oh, she's feeling bad for me or something like that. And she said, oh no, it had to do with the fact that I had never stopped and thought about, realized that was an option. I'd never considered, because she said it was just this thing I did. And she's a younger woman, in her 30s. And she's a fabulous mother, she's very, very happy being mom. She said, don't get me wrong, it's not that I wouldn't have done this. It's just, she says, it seems odd to me that I never thought about it. And I think that's one question I always say to people, who say, why don't you have kids, is why do you? Because I think we don't ask that very often.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think that is one of the main things we hear child-free women say, or even mothers. Like, I didn't know I had a choice. I, for once, personally, didn't know I had a choice. And then when I found out, I was like, I was so relieved. I think it's just so embedded in our DNA, in our head, the way that we're brought up. Advertising, like Kristen said, it's everything around us. It's just pointing to that. Become a mom. You need to do that. It's the next step. You need to tick that box. So, I completely understand that. I wanted to circle back and ask you something. We're talking about pressure and societal pressure and whatnot. There's also family pressure. And you mentioned your mother was disappointed that you weren't going to become a mom. Did she come to terms with that?
Yes. Without saying too much about, how the story goes, because I definitely, a lot of this was a journey about there's the relationship with my husband throughout it, but all these other sort of relationships that thread through that. And with my mom, I think that she always, on the bottom line, believed that I was missing out probably on the biggest joy, as defined by her. But we had further conversations about it. And one of the big sort of understandings for me as I wrote and as we had conversations was that we make comments to people, judgments that land very deeply on that person, that often we don't realize we've forgotten that we even said it, which was the case with her. She had forgotten she said it. And I think that in her mind, all of the ways that she acknowledged me, she must have felt, completely outweighed that one comment. But that was the one that I took in and, used to hurt myself with, was that she was disappointed about this one thing. And I was afraid that she always would feel somehow that I had a sadness, or I was missing out, or later in my life I would come to regret it. But, so far I haven't. And at the end of her life, it was pretty clear to me how really happy she was about the life that I was living, the relationship I had. She adored Bill. And so I think she felt like I chose pretty well.
I personally found the story uplifting because I am one that seeks freedom. And as a child, that's what I looked at, because I would hear adults speak about, oh, when we retire and our kids are grown up, we're going to do this, 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 and this. And for me, it was like, well, why don't I just bypass that altogether and explore life? Motherhood never, I didn't like what I saw, even though my parents willingly went through that. And I was like the rebellious daughter. So I guess I had that to offer to make them question, why did we do this? So I come from that too. But, you know, reading your journey and listening to you speak and how you've created this life that you love, and that it's possible, because we're taught that we're selfish if we do things for ourselves, but it's so important. And giving your, like you mentioned, you and your husband give each other space to go through what you need to go through. You're supportive. And I feel that we need to do that individually, women and men, parents or not, but we're not encouraged to, because one of the greatest joy for myself so far is being able to explore what I can do. Not that I have a whole lot of answers, but just that freedom. And it's not that I ever want to talk somebody out of having children, but I wish more people would be courageous enough to explore their own opportunities. You know, you talk about living present, like being here present, what's in front of you, what is great about your life, even though we all want things. It's just, you know, for people to say, hey, it's okay to do what you want to do. Ask yourself what you want. You know, you've done that, you are doing that, and you're leaving this awesome trail for other people to follow, because, you know, we don't have a whole lot of examples of, even just from your perspective, you know, child-free community, we're speaking more about it, but, you know, we're still in a way kind of infants sorting it out. So it's just, I guess, is there anything you would encourage, like for somebody watching who is struggling, whether it's child-free or they're in a situation similar to you, what would you say to get through that? Like, give themselves time and space to figure it out without worrying, okay, where's my baby daddy coming from, or my baby mama coming from?
Yeah, I would definitely say when the fear and anxiety come from looking into the future and worrying about what's out there, the unknown, and if we just stay, you know, in this moment with what is I want. But as the question comes up, the sense of, you know, well, I really do want to have a child, is thinking about what is it that I think will happen in my life as a result of that, and really sort of playing that tape out. What will my life be like? And being very realistic about sort of what the impact of a child is. I can't know when people say, well, you have no idea what this love is like. You know what? They're absolutely right. I have no idea what the love of a child is like, of my own child. I do know what the love of children is like. And so I think it's understanding our own capacities for love are there. And just thinking about, mostly it's just, there's no right or wrong, I guess is mostly what I'd say. There's not a right or wrong choice. A lot of people say, I'm afraid I'm going to regret this. And regret is such a messy term, because no, you're just going to go on and have the life you chose, you know, and this is the life. And loneliness, people who don't have children have a lot more capacity to build friendships, to be there and, you know, to have all kinds of connections if it's an issue of loneliness. And, you know, that's not something, you know, that I worry too much about. So mostly I guess what I would say is you're going to be okay. There's no right or wrong. And if you choose to have a child, great. That will be a whole other one kind of path of experience. And if you choose not to have a child, it's another path of experience. Have fun.
And also great.
Yeah. Yes. And also great. Yeah. I mean, both of them. It's just, for both of those, it's just a choice. For some people, it's not. I think that the people who are dealing with infertility, it feels it's not a choice, but then it is, what do I do with the circumstances that have been handed to me? How do I deal with those?
You really took the opportunity to explore this for yourself. You know, you chose to marry someone who did not want to have children, knowing how you felt about motherhood, you were exploring it, but it's really awesome that you took this time to really explore yourself, because I know people that say, okay, well, I will have a kid. They did not want to be a parent. And then they got into a situation where they said, okay, fine, I'll have one. Or they ended up becoming pregnant and becoming a parent. My brother was one of those. And then it's almost too late to explore because you can't, there's no time. So, I mean, really, like for you, there was something inside of you that made you go, hey. So it's not common, really. So how do you think that came about? Like you really did decide to dig into this and explore it. And a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah. I just always was a kid who always had a fairly rich inner life and a curiosity about how we think, how we engage, how we make connection. In school, I was often the kid that other people came to for problems and questions and support. And so I've just always been curious about, sort of understanding the self and understanding how relationships work. And, pursued a degree in counseling, fairly early on, got involved in personal growth work. I was just always curious about that. And that was one thing that I had a sense of whatever it was that I was going to do, work-wise, I wanted to just understand sort of how did I get to this thought? I'm one of those people who, when someone asks a question like, "Oh, where did that question come from?" Let's follow the rabbit hole that led you there. So a lot of it, I think, is just my nature to be curious and to explore. And then I ended up from that drawing people into my life who were like-minded. And so those are the kinds of conversations that I have with a lot of people in my life, or, just about the way we work internally. Yeah.
Have you had a lot of parents read your book so far that have?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. It's been a lot of the feedback I've gotten from people have been, whether they're people who've had children or not, as it really made me think about why. And for the people there were some people who didn't have children who examined that a little bit differently. But especially parents who said, yes, it really made me think a lot more about not even really the choice I made, but the fact that I had children and didn't think that much about it. And it also helped them become aware of people who do not have children. And I think made them more curious about what's up for you, not why, but for the people who maybe didn't have children who wanted them. How is that for you now? How can I be supportive of you? And for the people who have made a very clear decision not to have children, how can I also be supportive and not make thoughtless comments about that? I've had people who have children who are at the age where they could become grandmothers say, I am not going to ask my children about that anymore. It really got their attention.
Yeah, standing ovation for that one. That's the thing with all of the material in whatever form it comes to people, whether it's a meme or a book or a show talking about this topic. It's just awareness, because a lot of time in the Childfree community we often feel unheard and we feel disrespected because everyone's assuming that we are going to change our minds. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I received your book, I mentioned it and I had a couple people say, what? Because it's so foreign that, we're always told, one day you're going to meet somebody and you're going to change your mind. I'm like, well, I know somebody that met somebody and she changed her mind about having kids. And it's not to be flippant or not to take away, because we all go through a journey. Some may have a little bit easier than others, but it's just finally seems to be breaking away these these remarks, and no one really thinking about the fact that, wait, there are options, and there are good options, and it's not, as you said, it's not replacing or second best or anything. It's just another option. Mm-hmm. So it's great that you're getting that response as well from people, but it's just making them think a bit more, because we all need to do that. Mm-hmm. Just think a little bit more about things.
Yeah. It is that sort of the thoughtless comments, and I'm still so surprised by them. I say someone who's a grandmother, oh my gosh, being a grandmother is the best thing. And I think, compared to what? What are we comparing here to? And just all the sort of random sort of comments that people make, and similar, like if you've gone through a death of someone close to you, and the comments that people make that are about them creating their own comfort versus really thinking about how is this going to land on the other person. And I think people just don't think very deeply often about what's coming out of their mouths and how's that going to sit with the person who's right next to me, who, maybe doesn't have a child. And what is it like when I say, oh, it's this the best ever, isn't it? It's like, well, no, I don't, not necessarily. No.
I would want to know what the most important, well, actually, I want to know what made you decide to write your book.
I keep kind of trying to go back, because I started my book started really writing it as an essay about 7 years ago. And I wanted to speak to the fact of being childless. I wasn't seeing a lot of more personal essays. There was some writing out there that was maybe more prescriptive about, what do you do if you are dealing with infertility. But there wasn't a lot of just conversation of this is what it's like, or this is the journey that led me here. And I wanted to speak to the complexity of that, because I do think that for many people, it changes over time, that we are not static in very much in our lives. I think, we change our feelings about the person. Often, people, you marry someone and then you don't want to be married to them, or our jobs. And I think also that the desire to have a child or not have a child is not necessarily static. So I wanted to speak to that, the moving in and out of that. And I wanted to write about being in a relationship where two people want something different and manage to probably fall deeper in love by the fact of that difference.
And what did you want? What did you most hope or want people to take from it? What was the core of what you were trying to communicate?
I wanted people to, it is the love story part of it is a really big part of it, and not just the love story between Bill and I, but about the capacity to love, and to know ourselves. There's a quote at the beginning of the book, May Sarton quote, from, I'm drawing a blank. Mrs. Stevens, here's the mermaid singing. And the quote is, love opens the door, as far as I can see, into I'm not getting this exactly right, but the most awful and terrible parts of our own real selves. But that being in relationship with another person is often having a mirror held up to ourselves, and that we have to look at ourselves in friendship, in mother-child, sister, partner, all of those kinds of relationships. We're forced to look at ourselves if we're willing to open our eyes. And so I wanted actually people to get more than just the story about childlessness or being child-free, but about how do we connect with each other, and how do you continue to look at and explore your own self in the face of the other.
Is there anything that we didn't ask you, or anything that you just wish we had, or that you really want to say?
Well, there's something I really want to say that doesn't have to do with me or my book, but has to do with just a real great appreciation for people like you who are doing what you're doing, which is shining a light for what I think is a quite big community, and opening up all the possibilities of the ways to live a life, and sort of, drawing attention to the ways that, for instance, like what you said, Kristen, media, all of those things are trying to direct our attention one way. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and each of you in your own different ways. So, and together. Yeah.
Thank you. We're all doing it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jackie, for joining us. It's been awesome to listen to you, and thank you for sharing your story with the world and for our viewers. For you watching, we hope that you enjoyed this. Please email us at childfreegirls@gmail.com. We will leave the link to Jackie's book below. We love that too. So please check out her book. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Pinterest, but mostly Instagram and Facebook. So until next time, thank you for watching. Are you a mother that had a child before realizing you had a choice?
Leave your answers in the comments below.
Leave your answers in the comments below.